January 26, 1945, Holtzwihr, France. Snow fell like ashes over a world on fire. The forest crackled with gunfire, the ground trembling under the weight of German Tiger tanks advancing through the fog. Most men would have retreated. Most did. But Audie Murphy, a 19-year-old from Texas, stood his ground. He was small, barely 5 feet 5 inches, 110 pounds, the kind of man the army didn't even want at first. Rejected by the Navy, rejected by the Marines. Too small, they said, too young, too weak. But he refused to go home. He fought his way into the infantry and climbed the ranks through sheer will and a kind of courage that bordered on madness. Now, on this freezing morning, his company was shattered. Dozens of men lay dead or wounded. The rest had fallen back to regroup. Only Murphy remained on the front line, staring at a burning M10 tank destroyer. Smoke billowed from its turret. Ammunition inside was cooking off, popping like fireworks. He could hear the German tanks grinding closer, their engines growling like beasts in the mist. He looked at the burning machine, then at his rifle, nearly empty, and made a decision no sane man would make. Audie Murphy climbed onto the flaming tank destroyer. He grabbed its mounted .50 caliber machine gun and began firing at the approaching German column. Alone. The heat seared his face. Bullets ripped past his head, but he didn't move. One man against an entire company. One gun against tanks, rifles, and mortars. The snow melted beneath his boots from the heat of the flames. His mind was blank. Just aim, fire, reload, repeat. For over an hour, he held them back, killing dozens, wounding many more, forcing the Germans to retreat in disbelief. When his ammo finally ran out, he jumped off the burning wreck, called in artillery fire, and led his men in a counterattack, bleeding, exhausted, and furious. By the time it was over, the battlefield was silent. Hundreds of Germans were dead. The line had held, and the boy they said was too small to fight had just become a living legend. Before Audie Murphy became a war legend, he was just a boy from rural Texas, born into poverty, hunger, and heartbreak. He grew up on a cotton farm in Kingston, Texas, one of 12 children. His father disappeared when he was a kid. His mother, Josie Bell, worked herself to the bone to feed them, but there were days when food meant cornbread and imagination. Murphy dropped out of school in 5th grade to work, picking cotton, hunting rabbits, doing whatever it took to survive. He learned early what it meant to endure pain, hunger, and loss. When his mother died in 1941, something inside him cracked and hardened. He was just 16. America was on the brink of war, and he decided to go. He forged his birth certificate and tried to enlist. The Marines said no. The Navy said no. Even the paratroopers said no. But the Army finally said yes, because the war needed bodies, and Murphy looked desperate enough to die trying. In boot camp, the others laughed at him. Too small, too soft-spoken. They called him Babyface. But that babyface hid a relentless drive. Murphy didn't complain, didn't back down, and never quit. When the shooting started in North Africa, Sicily, and Italy, the same kid who had nothing at home now had everything to prove. He was a natural shot, Calm, quick, deadly accurate. While others dove for cover, Murphy stood his ground. He didn't fight for glory. He fought because stopping was never an option. By 1944, he had already earned multiple medals, his name quietly spreading through the ranks. He wasn't loud, he wasn't boastful. But his courage on the battlefield was becoming something soldiers whispered about. The boy who wouldn't die. Each mission pushed him deeper into legend and deeper into exhaustion. He saw friends torn apart. He saw men lose their minds. And with every loss, something colder settled in his eyes. By the time he reached France, he wasn't the same boy from Texas anymore. He was a soldier who'd learned one thing better than anyone else: how to survive when everyone else fell. By the summer of 1944, Audie Murphy had already seen more death than most generals ever would, but instead of breaking, he grew sharper, colder even. Every battle left a scar, every victory a question. Why am I still alive when so many aren't? He fought through the Italian campaign, surviving ambushes, bombings, and hopeless firefights. In one brutal skirmish, he single-handedly wiped out a German machine gun nest after the rest of his squad was pinned down. He was promoted on the spot. By the time D-Day shook the beaches of Normandy, Murphy's unit was deep in France, cutting through German lines. His reputation preceded him now, a quiet, deadly presence who never flinched under fire. Officers said he had a sixth sense for danger. Men followed him because he never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. Then came the Vosges Mountains, one of the toughest, bloodiest regions of the war. Endless forests, hidden snipers, freezing rain, and invisible enemies. For weeks, the 3rd Infantry Division fought tooth and nail just to stay alive. Murphy's leadership was no longer about orders. It was about survival. He'd crawl through mud to drag wounded soldiers back, then pick up his rifle and return to the fight. He was exhausted, running on instinct and rage, but there was something almost supernatural about his resilience. One officer wrote later, "Audie Murphy wasn't fighting the Germans anymore. He was fighting death itself, and somehow death kept losing." By the end of 1944, his medal count had already surpassed most heroes: silver stars, bronze stars, purple hearts. But the war wasn't finished with him. In January 1945, the Germans launched one last desperate counterattack. The snow-covered fields of Holtzwihr would soon become the stage for Murphy's greatest and most haunting act of heroism. A field of white, a burning tank, one man who refused to run. The day was coming when Audie Murphy would cross the line from hero to legend. January 26, 1945, Holtzwihr, France. Snow fell in silence, but the forest ahead was alive with death. Audie Murphy's company was spread thin. Barely 40 men left to face hundreds of German soldiers supported by tanks and artillery. He could hear them before he saw them. Engines growling, treads crushing the frost-bitten earth. When the first Tiger tank broke through the mist, Murphy shouted for his men to fall back. He would cover them. He climbed onto the burning M10 tank destroyer, the same one still smoking from a direct hit. Ammunition inside was cooking off. The next explosion could kill him, but he didn't care. He grabbed the .50 caliber machine gun mounted on top, swung it toward the tree line, and opened fire. The recoil shook his body. The metal beneath him was searing hot, but his aim was deadly. Every burst tore through German infantry like thunder. He raked the machine gun nests, cut down advancing soldiers, and shattered the nerve of an entire attack. Bullets whipped past him. Mortar shells landed so close they lifted him off the tank, but each time he got back up. For an entire hour, Murphy held his ground, alone. The snow around the tank turned black with smoke and blood. At one point, he called in artillery fire, dangerously close to his own position, screaming coordinates over the radio as bullets ripped his jacket. The operator on the other end thought he'd gone insane, but when the shells landed, they tore through the German ranks, scattering the survivors into retreat. By the time Murphy ran out of ammunition, the German assault had collapsed. The field was littered with bodies, tanks smoldering in the distance. He jumped off the burning wreck, rallied his men, and led a counterattack to secure the line. When it was finally over, he was covered in soot, blood, and silence. He refused evacuation. He refused rest. He just stood there, staring at the field, as if trying to understand how he was still alive. For that one stand, Audie Murphy would receive the Medal of Honor, the highest award for valor in the United States. But when reporters later asked him how it felt to be called a hero, he only said, "The real heroes are the ones who never came back." The war ended, but for Audie Murphy, peace was never part of the victory. When he came home in 1945, America called him a hero. He was only 20 years old, yet he wore 33 medals, including the Medal of Honor. The most decorated American soldier of World War II, his face was on magazine covers. Parades were thrown in his name. Hollywood wanted to turn him into a movie star. But inside he was still standing on that burning tank, still hearing the screams, still smelling the smoke. At night, he'd wake up sweating, diving for cover, reaching for a gun that wasn't there. He slept with a loaded pistol under his pillow. He couldn't stand fireworks or crowds. They sounded too much like artillery. No one called it PTSD back then. They just called it nerves. Hollywood came calling anyway. Murphy agreed, maybe to distract himself, maybe to survive. He played himself in the 1955 film To Hell and Back, based on his own autobiography. It became the most successful war movie in Universal Pictures history. But fame couldn't silence the ghosts. He donated much of his earnings to help veterans, yet his own pain drove him into gambling, insomnia, and dependence on sleeping pills. He once locked himself in a motel room for a week to break free from addiction, alone, shaking, determined. Despite the torment, he never let the war take his humanity. He spoke out for soldiers struggling with what we now call post-traumatic stress, long before anyone else dared to admit that heroes could bleed on the inside too. On May 28, 1971, Audie Murphy's luck finally ran out. He died in a plane crash in Virginia, age 45. The same nation that once called him too small to fight buried him with full military honors at Arlington National Cemetery, where his grave remains one of the most visited of all. To this day, his name stands as a symbol of courage, of endurance, and of the quiet cost of surviving what others could not. Because sometimes the bravest fight isn't on the battlefield, it's learning to live after the battle is over.